that? It is the end of the world. World 2 is closing, and we are at the halfway point of Lost Levels. There's now going to be about a 20-minute break, after which we're going to have an entirely new set of speakers. But wait, we don't know who these speakers are. Well, luckily, we have you to fix that problem. So, if during the break you decide you have something to say, something to perform, something to share, something to question or challenge or provoke, or maybe you just want to stand up here and be silent for a while and meditate, that's fine too. If you want to do something like that, talk to me. I'll be at the board, and we're going to have basically the second half be completely new, diverse talks. If you have given a talk and you want to give your talk again, that's perfectly fine because people can't listen to everything at once. Do that. All right? Have a great break. See you again in the second half of Lost Levels. Bye.
I'm Colleen Macklin. I teach at Parsons, the new school for design, and founded a lab there called Pet Lab, which I co-direct with
me, who's John Sharp, who also teaches there, yes, and I'm co-director of Pet Lab. So one of the things we do at Pet Lab is we write curriculum to help get kids into game design. And right now we're working on one to figure out ways to integrate games into arts education. So we're talking about fine art, like we probably all took painting and drawing classes when we were little kids. Some of us probably took like theater classes, music classes, dance classes. We're trying to figure out how to get games into all of this much sooner.
I started my career in the game world about 33 years ago when I was 10 years old, and then I quit about 31 years ago when I turned 12 because it was like super uncool to be hanging out with the three other dudes who were doing games and making games out of basics, and we were swapping them on cassette tapes. So part of the reason we're excited about integrating games into art is that art is a kind of more inclusive space for a lot of different voices. I went on and became a fine artist, and John, you worked in the arts too. And it's good to include people like you.
Even people like me can be part of games, I guess.
So part of the goal is really to try to make this industry kind of more inclusive, a lot like Lost Levels.
That's really our stealth goal for the curriculum we're working on, is to make more people, like all of us, start making games much sooner. So that's kind of, we really aren't here to talk, we're really here to listen to you all. We want to know, what is it when you were younger that got you to see games as something you could do?
Yeah.
When did games seem like they were for you?
So, when I was a kid, I would always kind of throw myself at opportunities to be creative. So like I had a Casio keyboard, and that was one of my favorite toys because I would mash on that thing and I would make crude little songs, and it was so glorious. And I would draw and I would write and I would make up these stories that I thought I would write eventually. And
so music and stories were kind of your roots.
Yeah. And I tried to draw. I tried to do everything, and I guess what I found when I started playing these adventure games, then I learned that there was a tool you can make the adventure games in. And that was really exciting to me because there was so much going on with adventure games, and that was also, you can put so much into an adventure game. It was really exciting that there was just something I could pour myself into like that. 9.
Nice.
9. I started making games at 9. I started actually making games at 12, and here I am at 22, and I'm making games.
Cool.
Woo! Nice.
So when I was a kid, my first computer was the Apple II, and the thing about that machine was that, like, if you hit a particular key sequence, if you didn't put a disc in, you turned it on, it says, please put a disc in. If you hit a particular key sequence there, it would actually crash and would drop you into the basic interpreter that ran the entire machine. And like, for me, it was just the fact that like, that was so shallow. It was like, it's literally just dropping you in, you're programming. And I didn't know what I was doing, but I found like 2 or 3 like kind of programming commands. And like, just from like, typing those in and being like, well, I'm programming now. I wasn't actually programming, I completely fooled myself. But because like, I could see all the parts inside of the machine, it really like, it made you think, you can do anything with this. All you have to do is just hit the 3 buttons when it turns on and you're the programmer now.
Nice.
That's not really so common these days.
I love it, like finding your way into programming through hacking almost, or just like figuring out how to crack.
Actually, it was bad because I finally made a game. It was amazing, it was large, but because I'd gotten into the basic interpreter by crashing the machine, when I tried to enter the like save on disk command that I found in the manual, it brought the entire machine down.
Nice. Yeah, take down the machine, people.
Go wild before you can make it.
Anyone else?
Thinking back, I was probably 13 years old when I was playing Homeworld, the original one, and I got involved in the modding community a little bit. We started playing with level files, and you know, the level files were all just Lua, that's all they were. And I, started thinking about like, oh, well, this can do formulas. And I was 13, I never coded before or anything. And I was like, let's try like, rather than saying like this, put this asterisk in this location, like put this asterisk in this for loop in this location. And I started making like rings and stuff, like using parametric equations, and just like, oh, cool, we can make really pretty things.
Nice.
And like, fell out of the community, but like,
But
showed
when you
people.
say pretty things, it was like you were creating visuals.
No, I was creating like rather than placing individual asteroids, how most of the modders have been doing it. I'm like, guys, this is Lua, we can use function. I didn't know what a function was. I just knew that Lua could use it, and it was a math format. And I was like, this is how we can do it. Hey, look, guys, now we have a sphere of asteroids in this map.
Nice.
And we can make them move appropriately by using by making the blocks, and you can make really, really interesting maps much more powerful than the guys that were really doing it by hand. They were sitting there placing individual things, which you can get very cool effects, but you can't make like giant mathematically perfect
One button. Power.
at its peak.
Yeah.
So,
Cool.
How old?
Nice.
13.
13. All right.
I think I saw another hand.
Yeah, right here.
Yeah, whenever we would get pizza as a kid, my brother and I would rush to eat the pizza so we would be able to have this whole cardboard land where we could take a Sharpie and fill it in and make our own Legend of Zelda over and over.
On the pizza box?
On the pizza box. And I still love pizza to this day for that very good reason. But we would make new weapons to help us solve the puzzles of all those weird like rumors that everyone said in school, like how to get out of the Lost Woods and find the blimp and like all these things that made no sense, but we would make them happen. And I actually started programming at 14 and doing things similar to that.
Awesome.
So pizza was your route.
Alright, I had a Commodore 64 when I was 3. My mom just bought one and had a kid sat in front of it, and it doesn't have a graphical interface. Like, you start out with BASIC. If you want to run a program from the cassette, you have to type and run. So, like, typing or coding was always part of using a computer for me. There was no hurdle. Alright, I need to go somewhere to do this. Like, it was right there, and I don't know, I was trying to get sprites to move when I was 6. I don't know why it was games, but they're always there.
Awesome. I love Brenda's. Oh, yeah.
When I think it was about 10, I found someone on a message board.
You have some graph? Yeah. Okay, you're next.
Yes. Illegal copy of RPG Maker 2000. And I actually came into this like way backwards because I didn't learn to actually program until several years later. Because programming was like the scary thing I had no idea how to do. So instead I would use the built-in eventing unit where you could like make dynamic events by sort of dragging and dropping and clicking from the to close menu. And I would use that just to make things like solitaire in this program when obviously it would have been probably easier to learn a little bit of editing or something. But that seemed like something that was way out of my reach. And way later when I got to college I was like, oh, all of the really good things that were in this program were actually the logic I put in programming, except I don't have to click from a menu, I can just type it out. That was like a big breakthrough for me when I finally
I love the idea of like start out by doing stuff super raw. Like there's a theme here. That's really good. Awesome. I don't know how much more time. 2 minutes.
4 minutes.
One more story.
Okay. So I actually had a class assignment when I was in 5th grade to make a board game. And I made this really crazy complicated board game that I'm not sure any of my friends really got or liked or anything, but I thought it was amazing. And then I went on this just binge of board game making from then until I don't even know, like maybe still now, where I would just make board games out of anything, like all found objects I could find, anything.
What class were you in?
It was just 5th grade.
So who knows?
It was my 5th grade teacher. Yeah, super cool.
All right, thank you, people. You've given us a lot of ideas and inspiration. We are going to change games, starting from kindergarten. So, thanks, everybody.
Okay, so who knows what MDA is? Okay, so I'll explain that really quickly. So MDA is it's a design framework. It stands for Mechanics, Dynamics, and Aesthetics. And the idea is that as a designer, you make game mechanics. You say that, oh yeah, this piece can jump over this one, and this one can, like eliminate this one.
Is this a piece of software or a philosophical framework?
Philosophical framework. So, but from those mechanics that you create, dynamics fall out of it. And suddenly, that like there's this certain strategy that because of those mechanics, these certain strategies are valid, or the game has these, these certain interactions. And then the aesthetics of it are that because of these dynamics, that feelings come out of it, and you feel a certain way, like, oh, this game is really depressing because you always lose because of the dynamics which came from the aesthetics. So one way that people often design games is they'll just start with mechanics and just see whatever falls out of it. But another thing you can do is start with the aesthetics and think, oh, we want a game that is about cooperation. And then you design dynamics that create cooperation, and then you create mechanics that create that cooperation through the dynamics and the aesthetics. So I recently our studio found ourselves in a situation where we had to create science games. And so our first thought was, okay, we're gonna take some science things and make mechanics that are just science, So like there's gonna be a simulation in it of, like the way the metabolism works in a body. And that's very much going about it from the mechanics point of view. But by the time we started trying to turn that into a game, there was no game there. It wasn't playable, it wasn't fun. And we sort of like, oh God, what do we do? Like we're screwed, we're gonna go out of business, it's gonna be terrible. But what we ended up figuring out, thankfully, was that if you sort of change the way you think about it and push the facts into the dynamic stage, what you can do are just make game mechanics that just play like game mechanics. So in our metabolism game, you flick things around and then they smack into each other, and sometimes it causes stuff to happen and sometimes it doesn't. And there's buttons you can push that sort of introduce like force vectors that move things around into different regions. But the specifics of our level design model like the human body and all the different parts of it. And the place where these particles spawn is actually correlates to things in real life. And the ways that things interact when they combine relates to the science. So the dynamics end up being something that actually does model the system, but without actually just being a literal simulation. And the aesthetics of it, you end up with something where the aesthetic isn't, my God, this is a boring simulation, but my God, this is a game. And it ends up being delightfully playful and playable. So I have no pictures, but you can just imagine how wonderful it is.
What's it? Can we play it?
Only if you have it with you. No.
I can tell you though that when the kids I've done testing with this game. When the kids play the game and you ask them what the rules of the game are, they actually do describe the digestive process from the molecule perspective. Oh, you combine oxygen with glucose and you get energy and CO2. They'll say that. So it's amazing. Yeah, it's really great.
Any questions? We have like 30 seconds left, I'm guessing.
What age range?
What?
Middle school.
Middle school, yeah.
Are you having any official metrics with the game after your release?
What do you mean?
Like, do you have are you going to do a test run with people that don't play the game and people that just try to learn it in a traditional way? And then
we're going to do it. Whether that's effective, I'm not sure. Simply because, a lot of tests are designed to test whether people, if you learn by reading something, and then the test is in the form of reading something, you're probably going to do better if you learn via the traditional means of reading something than playing a game where you're forced to come to conclusions on your own instead of being told. So I think it's highly likely that you could test it using, using a test for traditional mediums and have the results be worse. If you build a game-based test, they do better. But that sort of becomes much more a thing about values and what do we value in education. It's something that's much harder to push and make money off of than just saying yeah, it works, it's great. That's a longer talk than 5 minutes, I think. Hey everybody. All right. So,
My talk is called Find Your Dream Team. It's about finding great people to work with and make games with. I'm going to start general and then get a little bit more specific. Finding good people is hard, and that's the most general thing because anyone in any industry on any team can say that. But it's also true in the game industry, whether you're a student who's just graduated, who's looking to start an indie game company, or whether you are an indie game studio or a small studio who's looking to hire additional people, or even if you're a team at EA or Activision or something like that. Bringing somebody on, figuring out whether they're good or not before you start paying them huge amounts of money and give them a contract is a really difficult thing to do. So, I'm going to go over some things that might help, essentially. Sorry, I haven't practiced this at all, by the way. This is my first time giving this talk, so open to critiques. Anyway, basically, finding somebody to work with is a lot like dating, actually. You start off, you try and find people with common interests, you have certain types that you're looking for, you have a background that you imagine they'll have, and you have to go out there and try to find people that match that. So, essentially, you're looking for a 3D artist for your shiny new game that you have this idea for, and you have to go out and find somebody that A, wants to make the same kind of game as you, B, has a cultural fit that matches with you, so you speak the same language, and C, has the work ethic and quality so that they'll actually contribute something to your game at the end of the day. So that's a pretty difficult thing to do, but I think having worked with a lot of people and seen a couple of different studios and how they work with people, I can give you a few tips here. Basically, to start with, you just have to find people, and there's lots of resources online for doing that now. There's like TigSource, there's GameDev.net, there's a lot of different forums, there's DeviantArt, there's a site called Sketchfab where people upload portfolios of 3D models. You can see them in the browser, rotate them, it's really cool stuff. Going out to all of these sites is a great way to find people that have the experience you're looking for. Step 2 then is to review their work. If you see one good model that somebody's done, maybe that took them 2 years to make. You have to look for somebody with a portfolio of experience in the stuff that you're looking for. If you're looking for a programmer, you don't want somebody who has only ever done 2D games. Maybe somebody that's done 2D or 3D, or at least several different kinds of 2D games. Somebody with a little bit of breadth of experience. And then step 3 is to chat a little bit. Like, no matter how good somebody's work ethic is and how well they work, how awesome their history is and how great they are online, you need to talk a little bit just to see if you fit together in a cultural and work context. So, this guy might be the best 3D programmer in the world, this guy specifically, but if we can't talk, if we can't work together, if after everything I say he just says, sure, then it's not going to be a really good fit, for working together over an entire game project. So having a little bit of discussion is essential just for figuring out if we can work together. And then the last phase, the most important one, I think, is ramping up slowly. Adding somebody to your game is like a really big commitment. Games are huge. They're an enormous amount of effort. They take a long time, and they have a lot of moving parts. So rather than just dumping tons and tons of work on somebody so that they immediately get stressed out, burned out, and leave, it's really better to start slow. Give them something small, see how they accomplish it. Is it within the time that you're expecting? Is it to the quality you're expecting? And you can work with them as they sort of grow with your team, with your company, with whatever your situation is. So I think that's really important because I've seen a lot of people, say, "Oh, this guy is such a great 3D artist. I want him to do everything right now." They get really excited, but then they get really disappointed if things aren't absolutely perfect from the start. So I think that sort of ramping up training phase is very critical, especially when you're a small team. So all of that said, I'm making a tool to try and make this easier. It's called Gamer Talent. It's just gamertalent.com. And basically right now it's a portfolio site where you can try to find other people to start a game team with. So feel free to ask me if you have any questions, or if you have, if you want any additional advice about hiring and getting people for your team. Thank you very much.
Next up, we have Sos Sosowski with Limited Glitch. Before that, could I ask, is Greg Lovenall in the audience? No, that's alright, thank you, enjoy.
So actually I didn't prepare for that talk, so if I get stuck or you want something to say, just raise your hand and I would like to participate. Basically, what I want to talk about is glitches and bugs in your code, where first of all you need to acknowledge that the bugs that are in your code are your creation. They might be conscious or subconscious, but it's you who put them there. And I saw people hate finding bugs, fighting bugs, and you can actually enjoy it. You should actually enjoy it, because when you are finding a bug and trying to get over it, however hard it is, if you are angry or frustrated about it, your mind is a bit clouded. And you, as a programmer, you probably know that having a clear mind and open mind is really important in writing code and maintaining it. So what I'm getting at is actually not bugs, but glitches. You can actually write a code that can facilitate glitches in a way that you can have player interact with the game without facilitating it as a programmer, as a code that is inside, in a way that can enable him to do something unexpected. So you make a game, for example, you make a game and player beat it or beat a part of it in a way that you couldn't have predicted, but it's also awesome. Like an example, I made a game, platformers are a good example because they have usually states. You have a state, your player is either standing or jumping or falling or attacking, like in a melee platformer, or being hit. But if you get rid of it, you can calculate if he's standing or sitting or, I don't know, falling each frame. You can also have multiple states, so variables, like is he attacking, is he being hit? He can be attacking, jumping, falling, and I don't know, standing at the same time. It creates something different. You can have a glitch, you can have it work in a way that you didn't have predicted, and not break out, not crash. Like for example, I had in my game, I had a boss, and there were two types of attacking. You got a special attack that you have to charge with normal attacks. So the boss could only have been beat with special attacks. But also when you were hitting enemies, you got a combo. And what one player did was hit a boss repeatedly, not building his charge better because it was disabled, but he was building up a combo. And when he got a 100 combo, he basically got him in one hit, and it was something that I couldn't have predicted. And it is something awesome because it was kind of hard to pull off, and a good way to get rid of the boss. Okay, I have 2 minutes left. So can I have any examples of you making a game where players have done something that wasn't predicted? Yes.
My first end level, I had like a missile shooter that like always killed me. So I was like, oh, they can't go that way. They have to go all the way around. And the first speed run that someone posted of it, they just dodged the missile and like with zigzags it. And that was kind of cool, but I fixed it.
also, you can have bugs work as your advantage. You can rob them, isolate them. You can even make a different game out of it. Like for example, is a classic Grand Theft Auto. Like the Grand Theft Auto 1 was meant to be an Ignition. You know Ignition. It was a top-down racing game, inspired city racing game. So you just race around the city and there were policemen who were chasing you. But because of the bug in the code, police chases got ridiculous. And instead of going over the car that you're riding and stopping it, they just bumped into the car from many different ways. They went like, wow, this is so awesome. They sent it out to testers, and my favorite part is when the police hits me, and it's so awesome. And you should be making the game about police chases. So they made against the game where the police actually chases you most of the game. 30 seconds left. Okay, thank you. I am SOS. I'm pressed today.
Yeah, this will work. Hey, my name's Teddy Diefenbach. I have an indie company in LA called Rad Dragon, and we're working on a game called The Moonlighters. And I want to talk for a second about a methodology for interactive storytelling that I've been working on and trying to identify that I've seen in some games and I'm trying to kind of develop. So I love what's happening in games these days. You know, a lot of games are obviously very invested in the idea of giving player control of the story in the game. You know, the classic example being giving you choices in a conversation where I get to choose what I want to say to you, and that's going to have an impact later on in the story, or maybe immediately. And everyone really connects very directly with that because it's exactly what we do in any conversation. You know, you say something to me and I choose what to say back. But there's another dynamic that happens in human interaction that's sort of the inverse of that, which is that sometimes an event will happen to me that I caused, but I didn't know how I caused it at the time. Right, so I'm doing things. I'm talking to you, and I say something, right? But I don't know that that's going to impact my story later on. However, later on, when something happens, maybe I offended you and I didn't know, right? I'm probably going to be able to look back and say, oh, that's what I did. That's the mistake that I made. And there's a really strong connection there that's sort of the inverse of the traditional way that games let you impact the story. So it's something we've started to call narrative listening, and it was inspired originally by, for those of you who are familiar with Chrono Trigger, there might be like a lot of nodding during the story, but really quickly, the courtroom scene. There's this scene about an hour into the game where you get put on trial for kidnapping someone, basically. And all of these NPCs come up and they bear witness to your character based on things that you did in the game. Not decisions that you made when presented to you, not conversation options, but things that you did by accident. You bump into someone and do you help them up and you pick up their bag first. Seemingly benign decisions. And it comes back and they make you feel like, man, this game is watching me all the time and everything I do is important. And they don't really continue to do that, but it's this really interesting nugget. So that's the sort of thing we're working on. If you played the recent Walking Dead game, it's kind of the exact opposite. You know, you'll have a conversation and sometimes that little text pops up in the corner that says, he's going to remember that, right? And the way that the story changes is all about you seeing those and not really being sure what it was that it changed, but being really fascinated that you know you've made a difference. This is sort of the opposite. We don't tell you when you've made a difference, but you'll know when it happens what it was that affected them. So a really simple example of what we're doing. What's great about this is you can still apply this to conversations. You can still have it be kind of a combination of decisions I make in conversation affect the game, but you can also use gameplay. So one prototype that we made of the Moonlighters had you acting out a movie. We say in the tutorial, you're filming a movie, you're starring in it, we're going to teach you how to do what you do in the game, which is pull a heist. And when you finish, we have all these people come up to you and critique what you did, not based on the goals that were presented, but based on the context that was presented. So I told you were acting in a film, and this is kind of how you did. So that's just one example. It's so rich, and I'm trying to, obviously it's not brand new, but it's something we're trying to work on. And what I love about this is that it can be so easy to implement from a technical point of view. You can put like a couple of booleans in your game somewhere that just listen for key moments, because that's kind of how it works sometimes in real life. Like one or two things really have that butterfly effect and have a greater significance later on. So if you're interested in this, please come talk to me. I can only make one game at a time, and I'm trying as many things as I can and seeing what works and what doesn't. Because I have kind of like a running list of learnings, because there's a lot of pitfalls with this about changing the story without the player knowing that you're going to. But yeah, it's called. I'm calling it narrative listening, and I'm Teddy. Thank you.
Hey, can everyone hear me? Yeah. Alright, so my name is Altamirano. I've been making games for a little under 2 years, and I think that up until this point, everything I've made is shit. And that's okay. There was an interview that someone did of Ira Glass, the host of This American Life, where he reviewed some of his early work, and he just ruthlessly tore into it. And that was fascinating in its own right. But what followed was something that particularly resonated with me. And his language was radio specific, but I'm going to kind of generalize it. But when a creator starts to engage with a medium, all of their early works they're gonna be just disgusted by the low quality of it. And the reason that they're disgusted is because they have taste, and that's what brought them into this to begin with. That's why they are a creator. They have something that isn't being satisfied or isn't being satisfied enough, and they need to fill that gap. And rather than finding discouragement in the low quality of these works, they just somehow trudge through it and make more and more and more. Just get enough work out there in the hopes that each time you're slightly less shit until you bridge that gap between your ability and your tastes. And when you can finally say that you're satisfied with your work. I mean, we hear a lot about indie game developers who are just like, it's not quite done yet, it's not quite done yet. There's a certain element of that dissatisfaction there. There's a corollary to this that I'm interested in. I want to thank Paul for kind of bringing it to my attention, which is that there are people whose ability does meet their needs. And I would argue that those people actually kind of owe it to themselves to make content that lives up to that expectation. Kind of exemplified by something really interesting that happened last night, where in the Game Developers Choice Awards, there were 2 awards that went out to studios that would be typically regarded as AAA, and everything else went out to indie developers. And I kind of read that as a collective confession that much of the game industry is making content that does not live up to their own tastes. And I think that's a huge shame. And I mean, I believe that the people here are doing that, or they're striving to do it. So if you're working on building that bridge like I am, I salute you. Good luck. It sucks, but hopefully we can get there. And to the people who have already done it, I want to see what you make when you're just trying to satisfy yourself, because I think that will be really fantastic. Thank you.
I'm Jack, and fuck everything.
Woo! Fuck it.
Okay, so, am I expressing contempt, or am I literally telling you to go fuck things? I mean both.
Wait! To save you from having to look in the sun, why don't you stand over here?
I don't care. It's all good.
Fuck it. Whatever.
Fuck the sun.
I'm trying to fix things.
It's okay, Harry. You ruined my momentum, though.
Yeah, well, if he stood over there, we'd all be looking.
Alright, so, who here is actually completely satisfied with the culture and society we live in? Good. Because we, as developers of video games, have influence on our culture. We, as the independent people and the people at lost levels, are probably the kind of people interested in these things, who probably have lots of problems with society and culture. We don't have to be cogs in the wheels to serve an entertainment industry. We can make games as culture to enforce ideas for change, to see, like, culture isn't this thing that just exists that is mandated by some system. It's what we all believe that we live by. Culture is in people's heads, and we can influence people, so why don't we do that? Right? So we should fuck our culture. We should fuck everything. We have power to influence things, so why don't we do that? If we want to see the world become better, we should, like, totally do it. We don't have to just make games that are about, like, shooting stuff. I mean, we could, and that's fun, but we have tons of people doing that. We can make games that are about, like, how stupid money is and stuff. Like, isn't money stupid? That's it. Just fuck everything.
Talk about keyboards for 4 minutes. Alright. Most of these ideas came from Grant Morrison, who practiced something called I think Chaos Sex Magic in the early 90s. It was really fascinating to me because it was very individualistic, very empowering. It was like going to a religion or magic or science and pick the topic buffet. You're saying, you know what my social reality is? Oh, it's gonna be what I choose from this buffet. I've got my plate, and see you later. So he wrote at length about the various rituals he would perform to summon the characters that he was going to write about. Ignore all that, but it reminded me of my keyboard. And keyboard to me is sort of my media, it's sort of not. I mean, maybe video games is our media, maybe it's a keyboard, maybe it's a mouse, maybe it's a tablet, maybe it's pen and paper, whatever. But the media, the thing in the middle, right? The good side, the thing that lets you express yourself. The bad side, the thing that's between you and expressing yourself. So I went through these relationships with my keyboard, because it's sort of my keyboard. And I thought, why aren't they more like guitars? People name guitars, right? People name cars, people name these things. Is it because they're too new? Are they like too recently arrived into human culture? Like, oh, you're weird, or is it because they're mass produced, right? Like that can't be right. Well, I think that ship has sailed, obviously, with like photography and modern art in general. You know, we can totally play that. We can totally take keyboards and make them warm, right? Because I think a point outside of video games is there's a philosophy that's going the other way. If you think about the singularities and the hyper-materialists of the current time, they're saying, oh, you know what? We're like those keyboards. Yeah, I'm saying the opposite. I'm saying, no, those keyboards can be like us. They can be our appendage. They can be warm. They can be named. And it's painful, too, because it's painful to hear a few talks. I've only been to 3. About how I can't do this, I can't program, it's hard, it's just feel like razors, you know, it hurts to hear people say that. So maybe in a small extent this will make it a little bit easier, right? And all it has to do is not be weird. And for something not to be weird, all we have to do is to decide something's not weird. So I think you should name your keyboards.
I don't think my speech is going to live up to some of the ones that have been given today. I'm pressed, so some of you might hate me also. I just wanted to come out here and thank everybody that has participated today. It's been really inspiring. And thank all the developers who are in the indie community because you guys are way more interesting than what's going on behind me. I write for a publication called Bloody Disgusting. I don't know if any of you know it. We're like the biggest horror enthusiast website on the internet. And we don't get to review many games because AAA has decided that horror is a niche genre that doesn't exist, or at least doesn't exist for them. The last really big horror game that I can think of was probably Dead Space, because everything that's come since then, you might say, well, like, what about Dead Space 3? Not a horror game, totally just an action game. We review it anyways because what the hell, we don't have any games to review, so we might as well play something that's close. But this generation especially, AAA's have decided that they're not focusing on people in terms of like, you know, me and you guys. They're focusing on people in this broad mythological sense that everybody wants the same things and, you know, we're going to make the same game over and over again and everybody's going to love it. And that's not true. There are people out there that are trying to hold up these small niche genres, and there are people that are standing out here, not the people that are standing in there right now, unless they're at the IFG. And then, you know, they pretty much should be out here anyways. Or the IGF, sorry. And so, I just want to thank you guys. I mean, so like, the games I played this year that are closest to horror games, I mean, I don't know how many of you guys have played Papers, Please by Lucas Pope. If you haven't, you should go check it out. It's incredible. And you're going to play it and you're going to go, this isn't a horror game. Because it's not. It's a simulator of what it's like to be a border crossing guard in an Eastern Bloc country. And that has nothing to do with horror, but what it does have to do in common with horror is that you are making the player feel powerless. And that is the definition of a real horror game because you cannot be afraid if you feel like you're playing a power fantasy. And so the games that are best are like, you know, Papers, Please is a great example. You feel like you're powerless to really do anything. When you try to do something, you get screwed, your family dies, stuff goes really wrong. Stuff like the original Dead Space was great because you had a gun, but the gun eventually ran out of ammo and you were screwed. Stuff like Amnesia. Amnesia is the classic example of a great horror game. There is no combat in Amnesia. If you get seen, you're screwed and you have to run away. That's making the player feel powerless, and that's what most indie games do, and that is why you guys are great, because we don't need more power fantasies, or at least we don't need only power fantasies, because they're pretty boring after a while. If you already feel like you're going to win when you go into a game, why the hell would you play the game? You don't want to play Monopoly if you know that you're going to beat your 5-year-old brother or sister, because it's not fun. It might be fun for like 1 or 2 times, but you're not going to want to play it. You're not going to want to play only that game for the rest of your life. So I just, you know, really want to thank you guys. Thank you guys all for coming out here because I think that you guys are doing some amazing work, and I don't know, it's really inspiring. So.
Hi, I'm Jim Crawford. I'm going to put this here. Does anybody have any questions? Why did you put that there? Who am I? I made Frog Fractions.
Another game where you feel powerless.
That was not the primary emotion I was going for. But
What was the primary emotion you were going for?
Wonder and confusion. Favorite response when someone didn't get it? Oh, I'm trying. I'll come back to that. I'm trying to remember what it was. It was about 14 months of clock time and about 3 months of man hours. So it was a lot of just thinking about what I was going to do and not doing it yet. A lot of showing it to friends, getting their feedback. If I'd made this game in 3 months of a straight shot, it would have been terrible. I didn't even decide to put anything past the pond until 3 months had passed.
Would you recommend psychedelic drug use as a window into the soul?
I have no experience with this.
Are you proud of the game?
Very much so.
What's your favorite fraction?
1/2.
What's your favorite frog?
Poison dart frog.
Yeah.
Specifically, well, the specific thing was that my friend Rachel came to me with some art assets and said I was going to make this Missile Command clone with my brother. He flaked out on the coding. Do you want to make a Missile Command clone with me? And so I did that, and then I couldn't figure out how to make it fun. I tried iterating on Missile Command, and this is really hard. So I just added more and more shit to the game until that's what it was. So it ended up being Frog Fractions.
What's the currency called again? I forget. Zorkmids.
Also fruit.
How did, if that's the process you used to make it, how did you know when you made it? How did you know when it
The IGF deadline was coming up. I really could have gone on forever. I hypothetically could keep adding to that game for the rest of my life if it paid the bills.
How do you pay the bills?
How do I'm living off savings right now. Frog Fractions, the soundtrack sales almost cover hosting costs. So that's pretty cool. I'm working with Brandon Sheffield on a PlayStation mobile title. So we just got our first milestone payment for that, which is my first game paycheck. It's pretty awesome. Thank you.
How did you come up with such a round?
I let you guys direct it.
I love you.
On Bug Mars it is. I actually, about 8 months ago, up until 8 months ago, I actually had 2 grades, went down like Viking grades, which I loved, but sad story, I just had to get rid of them. And that would be amazing. No, probably not. What happened was to get from, I think this link looks pretty good, and I think like this link looks pretty good, but in between there's a no man's land, and you just have to not give a shit about how you look. And I can't see myself being in that position anytime soon.
How do you hang your bag like that? Oh, it's right on the bag.
Yeah, I took the lanyard off. There are little clips on that. I took the lanyard off. I attached it here. I was worried it was going to fall off, but it's been 4 days.
The red ones are rare.
I would love a Tony Xanta sticker or poster.
Might be considered cheating.
How to store this in a bag this size? Oh no. All right.
We're still.
I'll handle this in a moment. I'll just hold it. 30 seconds. My dad is. I actually don't know what he does for a living, but I know that he was. I haven't talked to him except on Facebook. But he was running for mayor of Pittsburgh, North Carolina, which I thought was pretty cool. He didn't win.
So, I am Evan Balster, and I'm here to talk to you about an epiphany that made me cry last GDC. This is why you should make your dream game. So, for the purposes of this talk, I'm going to assume the listener has a dream game. I define a dream game as a sort of mental illness where you have an idea and you're sick with it. It consumes your mind. You can't stop thinking about it when you're trying to go to sleep, when you should be going to bed, but you feel like you could still make something, but you don't want to work on the shit you've been working on. I define a dream project as something you want to have the joy of making, the distinction of having made. You want to exist in the world because it makes the world better, and you want to play yourself as a gamer. So, it's this weird personal idea you've got, right? And you don't know if this is something that you can actually like make a living making. But the thing about it, it's this idea that you love. You want to play it. You're constantly involved with this idea. It's something you really want that has a lot of value to you. And as for Nathan Bella's indie marketing plan talk last year, we can establish that assuming the vast majority of the time, there are other people out there, even if they're only a small minority of the population, who share our taste. And we want to make this thing because it doesn't exist. It's not out there. We're starved for what this is. And there are other people out there who want it. So it is viable to make this. It is viable to make a living off of this thing. So, that's one barrier down. The next barrier, maybe it's a big intimidating idea, but the thing is, as compared to less ambitious ideas that you don't love as much, you're going to be, if you are just constantly into this, your love will be behind your work on this game. You will work hard and you will continue to be motivated to work on this game even when it's hell, because you're in love with the idea, because you dumped yourself into it, because you're personally involved with this special thing. And because of that, the motivation level doesn't compare to a project that you're doing as a means to an end. So that's something I'll touch on later. So, well, yeah, no, a means to an end project. That's basically the trap I had fallen into prior to last GDC. I was making this game with a good friend of mine, that neither of our hearts were really behind. It was a good idea. It's a fun game. It's good to play. It's about the guy doesn't in the cave. It's a really awesome game, but it's not the kind of game that either of us really wanted to be making. So we were working on this thing, and I was depressed, and I was having motivation issues, and I had this other idea floating around. And basically, the thing is, there are various reasons why means to an end projects aren't a good thing. If it's making you means to an end projects that are making you a bunch of money, usually your burn rate goes up because you get used to a higher standard of living. So even if you are saving up, the money's going to run out quickly afterwards. But that's not a big example. The big thing is, if these are games you're making with the idea that you'll be making a living off of these games, after which point, after you've gone through the hell of making this thing you don't love, you'll have an income and you can make your dream game. There's a problem with that. You will learn the skills involved in making things you don't love, and you will learn to be complacent making things you don't love. This is where shareware houses come from. My friend Barth told me that the entire Australian shovelware, sorry, if I said shareware, I meant shovelware, no offense to shareware. The entire Australian shovelware industry came from people making shitty games to fund their dream games. And when they finished their first shitty game, it was met with mixed reception because they weren't in love with it and it wasn't as good as it could be. So they made more shitty games and just kept subsisting on this crap. And that's where shovelware comes from. It comes from broken dreams and broken hearts. So how do you do this? You consolidate. How do you actually achieve making your dream game? You consolidate the things you're making and the work you're doing both on your dream game and on other projects so that these goals mesh with one another. I do audio programming is my thing. That's something I did because I'm interested in it and I want to do it for my dream game. That's become a specialty that I can do as a contractor. Because I have these special interests, these unique interests in the things that will make this dream game in my head, I turn those into skills, and those skills allow me to make a living. I moved somewhere where I have a really low burn rate, so I don't have to make a lot of money. I'm used to a low standard of living. these are techniques, compromises you can make when you're young that allow you to work on dream projects. Your idea is a final point I want to make in this horribly disorganized talk. Your idea is this vulnerable thing that you're really insecure about because it's special and personal to you. But share it, and you will be surprised. It's like sharing a bad experience with family or something. How many other people will connect with you through that personal thing and understand your idea and why it is good to you, and they will think it is good as well. So you should talk about it, and that will give you hope for making it and for other people enjoying what you created. And those are various reasons why you should work on your dreams.
Okay, first of all, Stephen and Paul yesterday I'm going to make some generalizations. If you disagree with them, feel free to challenge me afterwards. I think I could safely say many of us are disappointed with a lot of the things in the AAA industry, as Jack said. A lot of that criticism stems from feeling that those games are unoriginal, and I think furthermore we feel that a lot of those games are unoriginal because they appropriate so many things from other forms of media. I've heard people say that BioWare's sort of, choose your own path narrative games are a failed attempt at appropriating literature because they locked the player into this path. We feel like Rock Band is not a good approximation of being in a band and participating in the creative music making experience because again it locks players into these patterns. And we can say the same thing about the tendency towards photorealism and borrowing camera shots from cinema. Those kinds of things come up again and again in this way. It's very easy to say these things are done poorly because we've seen them done well in other media. And so we have that barrier of comparison, point of comparison. So as designers, I think sometimes, especially in sort of the indie world, we want to say, we just need to focus on gameplay, and we need to focus on interactivity, because that's what we do really super well that no one else can do, is make our games super interactive, super reactive, and just allow players to explore these infinite spaces. And I think at the same time, it's really important to make sure that we're not developing games in a vacuum and recognize that even though there are elements of these things that we borrowed from other genres that we're rejecting, we still need to be aware of these things and allow ourselves to continue. So it's definitely possible, but I think we have to broaden the way that we're thinking about games in the context of other media. So I think part of the reason we don't see a lot of sort of successful influence from other types of art or media is because of the way that games have traditionally or historically been put together. I used to be one of my 7 majors before I came out of college was theater. And we used to talk about how theater, as a collaborative art, is sometimes slow to catch on to isms like socialism or expressionism or whatever, modernism, because to make theater generally you have to have a team and you have to have a budget, and just by the necessity of having to put all that stuff together, you end up a little bit behind the people who are at the forefront just throwing stuff on a canvas. But as indies, as people who are developing independently now, and as this becomes a more viable mode of making games, we don't have those restrictions anymore. And I think that is going to really allow us to look to other media. Because especially if you're a hobbyist or an independent developer, you might think that looking at other forms of media and borrowing from them is a step backwards. Because we have this great advantage of seeing something that no one else is. But I think there is a really responsible way that we can look at these other things and see what we can borrow from them, especially in terms of creating an emotional or compelling experience. And I think if we're going to elevate our craft, we have to find a way to innovate within the context of what everyone else is doing. And maybe I think it's important to look at what other people are doing with benchmarks and maybe say yes, this is a poor copy of something I saw in performance art. Yes, this is a poor imitation of what I've seen done in these other places. But at the same time, I think that doesn't mean that we're exempt from considering film and literature and all of these other things critically. And I think we do have a responsibility to respond to those things in our work as game designers. how that interacts with what you do. That's what I'm trying to do now, because for so long I've worked with so many different mediums that I felt like I didn't really have a home in any of them. And when I came to games, I was so tempted to just focus, on being the best game designer and making the most compelling game experiences that I could, that I was hesitant to look back at everything else I've done. And I think that's probably totally the opposite of the way I used to look at it.
Macklin, I teach at Parsons. I actually wrote my talk and calibrated it to be less than 5 minutes long. Let's see how we do here. Okay. Warning, this is slightly theoretical and definitely pornographic. One day, in the deepest jungles of the Brazilian Amazon, a butterfly of the genus Dynamite and a rove beetle engaged in a little exploratory ass play. As the butterfly extended its proboscis and began exploring the beetle's raised... Wait a minute, I'm not going to keep going here. So, what I am going to say about this, and this is actually something that is documented in this wonderful book, The Insectopedia, written by a colleague of mine at the New School, Hugh Raffles. This actually happened. This moment was actually recorded on film by the amateur entomologist George Kryzak. And in the chapter in this book called The Quality of Queerness is Not Strange Enough, Raffles describes how our understanding of evolutionary biology is constantly confounded by the wacky behavior of actual animals in the animal kingdom. Scientists tie themselves into pretzels and knots, and pretzels are a kind of knot, to try to put the behavior of gays, geese, lesbian bonobos, love those lesbian bonobos, and baggy fruit flies into a Darwinian framework. But as Raffles' survey of biological diversity discovers, it doesn't always work like that. Stephen Jay Gould and others have argued that it's not all function and no fun. We can't explain it all through adaptation and evolutionary theory, my children. Play isn't either. And I am the biggest culprit of saying things like, play is what helps us evolve. It's how we learn. It's how we become different thinkers. I say this shit all the time to people outside of our field in order to give it some kind of validity, right? Oh, of course, naturalism. Games are 8,000 years old and people have been playing for a long time. It has to have some use. There's some reason for it. But that's it. I'm taking a vow. I'm not going to do that shit anymore. The existence of queer insects shows us that anything in this world is possible, and it doesn't always have an instrumental reason.